Everything is perfect. My life in Colombia, 2026. In my 2025 Life in Colombia video, I commented on the changes in coffee prices from 2018 to 2024. Here's a quick review. I'm keeping the prices in Colombian pesos because it is only the comparison which matters. 2018, 1 arroba, which is 12.5 kilograms, was 70,000 Colombian pesos, average yearly price. 2019, 77,000. 2020, 110,000. 2021, 175,000. 2022, 250,000. 2023, 135,000. 2024, 200,000, and 2025, 300,000. No, I did not make a mistake. Prices increased steadily from 2018 to 2022. My ego convinced me that coffee prices will keep going up, but that did not happen. In 2023, the price dropped by almost half. Further, our coffee production dropped substantially, almost every year. Coffee production, 2018, 333 arrobas. 2019, 440 arrobas. 2020, 296. 2021, 158. 2022, 223. 2023, 91. 2024, 120. And 2025, 170. The drop in production was due mainly to cutting down different lots of our coffee. The coffee plant is cut down to an 8 to 10-inch stump after 8 years. In front of the old water tank, one can see the tall coffee trunks after the branches were removed and before the trunk is cut down. In front of that are the 1-year-old coffee regrowth from the stump. Once the coffee plant is cut down, it regrows and starts producing after 2.5 years. The coffee plant produces from years 3 to 8. By the 8th year, the plant is too old, too tall, and therefore produces much less. Other than this normal reduction due to cutting down the coffee plants, we stopped fertilizing the plants due to lack of funds. All our initial funds were spent on construction because we were ignorant to the fact that coffee sales would simply not be enough. In 2023, the weather changed so much that the coffee production was horrific that year. All these factors, combined with a drop of price during 2023, led to a total of coffee sales in 2023 of $3,000 US for the entire year. Our labor expense for that year was $5,000 US. Of course, divine perfection kicked in, and Lee made a little money online that year, and therefore we were okay. For the first time in 8 years, we had a decent income from coffee sales in 2025, and were able to buy fertilizer for the 2026 production. I'm looking forward to see the coffee production in 2026. In this picture, one can see the 1-year-old coffee in the first half and the newly planted coffee in the lower part. This is our 2-year-old newly planted coffee, and this is the 2-year-old cut down coffee right before its first production. These are 3-year-old plants filled with green coffee about 2 months before they matured to red coffee. And here I am in 2019 picking coffee on one of the 8-year-old plants before it was cut down. Back in September 2025, Erasmo, one of my two workers, who worked on the farm for 8 years, simply left. Just before that event, I had tried to encourage his son to do some work on the farm, but farm work was simply not his thing. After a few frustrating weeks, Erasmo stated, "I've reached this point and I'm not coming back." After 8 years, that was all the explanation I was given. Erasmo simply refused to tell me why he made this drastic and sudden decision. Initially, my ego was in panic mode, but after a few days, I realized that I no longer need two full-time workers. I am largely replacing Erasmo by working on the farm 7 days a week, and there is generally less work now. In my 2024 video, I discussed in detail our challenges with growing the Sacha Inchi plant. Every 3 to 4 years, and sometimes even sooner, the Sacha plant started to dry up its leaves and vines, and eventually all the plants died. Here is a healthy Sacha in the back with two coffee plants in the front. On this picture, one can see the same Sacha plant with most of its leaves gone. Here's another healthy plant, and here it is with half the leaves. On this picture, almost all the plants of Sacha are gone, except a few in the top rows. This is another lot with all the Sacha plants gone, with only the remaining posts. I was told in 2019 to plant a more resistant variety of Sacha, which I did. We planted 3 lots of Sacha, where previously grew pine trees. The soil was very acidic because of the pines, and also it is a very poor clay-type soil. A few Sacha plants grew in some parts where the soil was better, but mostly it failed and produced very little Sacha nut. Further, I realized that this supposed more resistant variety seen in this picture did not taste as good as the first variety seen in this picture. Other than the 3 pine lots, I also tried to kill off 2 lots of coffee plants by cutting down the trunk to ground level instead of 8 to 10 inches above ground level. Here is a short video.
Hola, here is Hector carrying one of the piles from down below of the coffee stumps onto here, where we pick it up, where Lee picks it up with the truck. This has just been a huge job, and it's nowhere near over.
I then planted Sacha into these 2 lots where the soil is fertile. The second variety of Sacha grew, and then, just like the first 3 lots, before 3 years were up, they all died off. I initially tried very hard to kill off the coffee plants, which, even though the stumps were cut at ground level, they continually grew new sprouts. I removed these new sprouts until I finally gave up, and at least 90% of the coffee grew back. Divine perfection, yet again. At that point, I decided to plant the new resistant variety together with the coffee. My ego simply did not want to give up. The plants grew nicely. The vines grew like crazy because the soil is fertile in this lot. But I did not realize that every vine had to be trimmed. The vines grew into the coffee and into the trees that grew in this lot. However, the Sacha nut production was extremely low. For years, I did not realize that if all the energy of the plant goes into growing vines, the plant will not produce the nut. Talk about a slow learner. My favorite saying used to be, "It is what it is." Now I say, everything is perfect. Once I finally learned that simple lesson, I also realized that the sacha plants were taking the soil energy away from the coffee plants, and the coffee production in these two lots was drastically reduced. This was another reason for reduced coffee production on the farm. Even though this more resistant sacha plant variety grew nicely in the coffee lot, after 3 years or so, I started to see the vines drying up again. This time, the bath soil was not a false explanation that my ego mind could provide me with. Further, I had found a very good insecticide, which we were now using regularly, and I was convinced that this insecticide would save the plants from dying off. However, the old vines continued to dry up, even though a few new vines were still growing. The death of the plant was now outpacing the new growth. That is when finally divine perfection brought me the explanation that I was searching for during 8 years. When I first went to a sacha workshop 8 years ago, we were told that sacha plant had a lifespan similar to coffee, around 8 years. Well, that was a lie. The sacha cooperative knew that if they spoke the truth, nobody would go forward with this project. The fact is that the lifespan of the sacha plant is 3 to 4 years. My new friends, Ruben and Rocio, the ones that are our associates in the Hen's Eggs project, went to a sacha workshop and learned the truth about the sacha plant. Looking back at my personal experience with this plant, everything is now crystal clear. However, I had to learn the hard way, with my own sweat, tears, and 8 years of constant work to learn that simple lesson. I tried to find the original sacha seeds. I have the resistant variety ones, but since we don't like the taste of this variety, I decided that we must go back to the original sacha. The story in Colombia is that the sacha cooperatives are bankrupt. The websites are there, but nobody's answering the phones. I suspect that most of the farmers that attempted the sacha project gave up after the first try, and the sacha farms disappeared. I am obviously a unique exception. I don't give up. I know that sacha is one of the main reasons I am here in Colombia. My soul is pushing me forward. However, what has changed after almost 9 years in Colombia is my awareness. I have no more expectations. Finally, I fully surrender to my soul. I do the work that is in front of me because I know that my soul is guiding me. It took me 8 years to figure things out, and now it's time for the next phase of my individual evolution of consciousness journey. My impatient ego is being tested. I learned about numerology a number of years ago. Without going into details, I will say that numerology is based on a 9-year cycle. When we arrived in Colombia in early May of 2017, I had just started my year 1, and 2025 was my year 9. On March 6, 2026, I am starting my new 9-year cycle. Once I realized this little fact, I made some more calculations and realized that 2008 was year 1 of my previous cycle. And that was the year we were raided by the CRA, Canada Revenue Agency. Later in that cycle, Lee and I lived our incarcerations. My last 2 cycles were 2008 to 2016 and 2017 to 2025, each one filled with huge challenges. I must say, I'm looking forward to this next one, which I know will be perfect. Our hens are doing very well. They have been continuously producing 40 to 45 eggs every day for 1.5 years now. We have 47 hens. I thought they would rest at some point after a year, but that did not happen. We are not making any money with the sales of the eggs because chicken feed eats up most of the profits. However, we have not started this project to make money, but to be in a position of having eggs when there is scarcity. I suspect food scarcity, even here in Colombia, is coming, together with all the other challenges that humanity will be facing in the next decade. Finally, circumstances guided me to realize that we are in this incredible position to offer our new friends part of the land of this finca so that they can build their house. When Lee was escorted out of Canada after his jail experience, he met up with my children, Luba and Greg, near the Canadian-US border. I was already in Villa de Leyva, Colombia, at that time. I don't remember any of these events, but Lee tells me that I must have talked with my children before leaving Canada and asked them to bring to Lee the few 1-ounce gold coins that were not stolen from us by the biological father of my children. Recently, Lee reminded me that these gold coins were still in Florida, and because his brother is quite sick, we had to find a way to get this gold out of there. The gold was sold, and the cash, minus an exorbitant amount of fees, suddenly appeared. It quickly became clear to both of us that we must use this cash productively. We offered to assist our friends with their house project, acting as the bank of hearts, meaning this loan has no interest. Here are a few pictures of the construction project so far. Ruben is the individual who posted the advertising for the sale of this property back in May of 2017. He brought me to the finca on his motorcycle. When I saw the waterfall, I knew that my soul created this paradise on earth just for Lee and myself. In this picture, we see Ruben, his father, his daughter Luciana, and me with Benito. Ruben then offered the services of his father because his father operates a bulldozer. 8 years later, his father rented this monster of a bulldozer, and somehow it just barely fit between the house and our water source wall. Through our backyard, the bulldozer is entering the new construction site. The new lower platform is starting to take shape, as viewed from the back corner of our house. One of the pine trees just fell over all on its own. This is the back view from the construction site looking onto our Sacha field number 3 and the upper portion of our neighbor's large farm. Preparations of the footings. View of the waterfall from the front of the house. Some of the pines will later be cut down for a more open view. The bricks arrived and are being unloaded. The rebar structures for the posts are now mostly in place. Because the soil in the far side wall of the house was not on solid ground, Tomas, the maestro, decided that instead of footings, a retention wall had to be constructed. Tomas, with the assistance of the workers, is starting to fill the wall with cement. Benito is overseeing the job. With the construction nicely underway, we lived a serious development. Our new neighbors started preparing their land for coffee planting. Initially, all the trees were cut down, and then they started a controlled bushfire in the far right position of this picture. Then they became impatient and decided to start the next bushfire late one afternoon as the wind started to pick up. This was during the dry season, and everything was super dry. That evening, the fire got out of control. The workers thought they had put out the fire, but the wind started a new fire near our large old pines. The workers returned that evening and put out the fire a second time. At 6 in the morning, Lee got up in a panic, screaming, "The coffee's burning!" I quickly got up and realized that the fire had restarted and it had burned all night. By morning, it was coming up close to our coffee. I ran to get our main worker, Hilbert, to help out. The other workers were back, putting the fire out for the third time. Gilbert was now helping out, and I pulled down our long hose all the way from the house. We had prepared the hose in order to water the sacha during the dry months. The fire was finally completely out. Quite a few of our avocado trees were scorched, and of course most of the pine trees. As I observed the damages, I realized that we needed to cut down these huge old pines. Some of them were creating too much shade near the coffee plants, and some others around the house are now way too tall, potentially endangering the house and interfering with the internet signal. As I was looking through my old pictures, I found of interest these next three pictures. This is the prepared site for our house after Ruben's father completed the job. Note the pines in the back. Here are the workers starting on the footings, and again, note the small pines. This is a picture of our kitchen in the Popayan apartment, where we lived during the construction. We had to buy the gray cabinet because there was absolutely no counter space in the kitchen. This was a two-bedroom apartment in a nice area. Hard to imagine that Colombians consider this a nice apartment. Up until this moment, I had never thought about the pine trees. They are, of course, beautiful, but serve no purpose and interfere in many of the areas. It turns out, as everything is perfect, that my new neighbor, the one in charge of all this chaos, has a sawmill. We came to an agreement, and his team is cutting down most of the old pines on the property, except most of those around the house. What a huge job that is. Here are a few photos of the job. A few pine trunks beside one of the scorched avocado tree. The truck backed up a long way down along this very steep slope. This is a different angle of the same slope with Benito overseeing the job. The sacha lots, with no more sacha on them, are above the road to the left. The workers are loading up the truck. A lot of that land is very steep, but coffee grows on very steep slopes, and therefore we will soon open up at least 1 hectare of new land for productive plants. On this picture, our 3 sacha lots are obvious because of the posts. This is a picture taken at least 2 months after the fire. Our land extends a little below the road, and then the neighbor's lot is the part which is still a little dark from the burning. This is another view, a little further down the road, where the slope is very steep. This is now past the neighbor's lot strip. Again, the third satchel lot above is now obvious. One can even see the red roof of our house, as well as the chicken coop. Another angle, further out, taken while I was out walking on the public country road with Benito. This is our coffee seedlings, growing in their individual bags before planting them in the field. This is the neighbor's lot with a few of the corn plants starting to grow. Our coffee is the green above. Our corn is growing in the satchel lot. The two small yellow leaves in the front of the corn plant is the newly planted satchel. We plant a fair bit of corn either in the coffee lots after the coffee trees are cut down, and now this corn is planted in the satchel lot. We do not sell the corn. It is way too cheap and therefore not worth the effort. We use the corn to supplement the chicken feed and also because it becomes fertilizer of the soil. We obviously get some corn for our consumption and to make homemade arepas. These are the branches that I collected out of the coffee field from the cut down pines and stacked along the road. A few of the tallest pines are being cut down in the back of the house. The before and the after pictures. The cut down trunks. Together with Ruben and Tomas, we are also talking about a tilapia pond with water in and back out of the river, as well as a large greenhouse for tomato growing. This will also be right near the river, in my favorite part of the finca. Ruben has other plans for the Cascada waterfall. Because he has a very large energy body, probably even larger than mine was, I encourage him to go forward with most of his project ideas. I now plan on being more of an observer, even though I know that my older energy body will never allow me to sit around and do nothing. As I observe what unfolds in front of me, with a lot less emotional attachments, I am in deep gratitude. I know that it is my soul, which is the creatrix of everything, and this creation manifests in front of me as perfection. The initial panic of the fire quickly turned into gratitude. I have tamed my ego to the point that I am almost never in fear. I trust my true self, my soul. I surrender to her completely. There is nothing for me to plan or control. I simply do whatever is the next thing that my soul places in front of me. I am surrounded by abundance. I have no fear of lack of any type. I know that I am a sovereign. This means that there is absolutely no power over me. Nobody can control me in any way, shape, or form, and I no longer carry the weight of responsibility towards anyone. I live in peace and I am in joy. Everything is perfect. Infinite love, Diastati. From millennium slavery to individual sovereignty. Let's rejoice, because the insanity we are experiencing is an illusion, which is pushing more and more of us to awaken. Our world is in an evolutionary crisis, because the human mind is ready to go beyond rational intelligence to a greater consciousness. In the Orient, in the 20th century, Sri Aurobindo and the Mother discovered and anchored truth consciousness, the supramental consciousness in the earthly atmosphere. Since then, the supramental consciousness has been operational on Earth as an active evolutionary power. Once well anchored, the new consciousness was ready to move on to the next stage, its popularization and propagation. In the West, in the 21st century emerged personal creation. Sri Aurobindo synthesized the Eastern and Western ideas of evolution and boldly declared that humans are transitional beings. They're not final. Evolution continues, and humans will be surpassed. This is the future awaiting humanity. This is an unprecedented adventure of consciousness on Earth. One single and sincere look at the present world situation is enough to convince us that it has reached the point of no return. Let's stop repeating our obsolete ways, which can only bring more suffering. Let us all spread the contagion of infinite love. In these times of irremediable disillusion of the illusion, let us keep our faith ardent with an unfailing sincerity. We must choose our soul at all costs. Infinite love.